for the ones standing guard, for the eagle-eyed, for the knights in shining armor, and for all those who support them. We are Grainger, your experienced safety partner, offering supplies and solutions for every industry, committed to helping keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com/safety, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is CBS Eye on the World. I'm John Batchelor, and my colleague Conrad Black, the distinguished biographer who writes a column for the National Post and also writes for American Greatness in the National Review Online. I refer to the NRO piece he's written on Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, a Republican senator who spoke very carefully in response to President Biden's remarks to the nation about his prospects to lord money over us, trillions and trillions of dollars. And Senator Scott, rather than refute point by point why we don't need those trillions, or perhaps they're trillions of dollars being directed into Democratic coffers, Senator Scott spoke to the history of the United States and the abuse of people, especially people from Africa or people who were at one time slaves. Senator Scott spoke very bluntly. He said, America is not racist. Americans are not racist. That was very blunt, very straightforward, based on history, especially based on the history of the Republican Party. Conrad, you've written a piece saying Senator Scott saying a simple thing simply made himself a presidential contender. How so?
Because the great rallying cry of the cutting edge of the Democratic Party now, they sort of woke left. Now, Senator Sanders, the unofficial leader of that group, says it's about 35% of all the Democrats, but they're doing the running now, and the administration is permitting them to lead. And their whole theory is that, to a substantial degree at least, the United States is a racist country and has always been a racist enterprise. That slaveholding was part of the raison d'etre for founding and sustaining the country, even though the country endured a terrible civil war in which 750,000 people died at a population of 31 million, you know, and as Mr. Lincoln said, everyone knew that in some way slavery was at the base of the cause of the war, and so for an African American, as Senator Scott is, to say this is bunk. The United States is not a racist country. There are some racists, but as a society, it is not racist. It is anti-racist. Because of who he is, a senator, an accomplished senator, and because he's an African American with a background having come from really quite modest socioeconomic origins, he is perfectly placed, in my opinion, to completely gelignite, fragment, and blow up the core of the Democratic message. He is, in effect, going to say is a complete fraud. It is not true. And it seems to me that if he were the candidate, he would make massive inroads on the traditional Democratic hold on the African American and even Spanish and Hispanic American vote. Although I'm not suggesting they are exactly similar. It just happens they have been traditional preservers of the Democrats. I think he would assault that base, and he would keep all of the traditional Republican support. So I think he could find him an extremely formidable candidate.
Conrad, do you think it's an unknown to the American voting public that the African American vote after the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, was Republican until FDR, until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that since FDR's advances, the African American vote has been on the Democratic side? Do you think that that's a surprise to Americans to learn that?
Well, I think they know that traditionally it's been a Democratic vote. I think many of them would not have thought particularly of the fact that when they initially were able to vote, it was just a tiny number of the African Americans who could vote prior to the Civil War, the emancipated slaves. that they would have voted for Lincoln. But if you think about it, it's obvious why they would. It's the party of emancipation. But, we're somewhat back to that. I mean, it was Nixon who ended school segregation. And Reagan, produced that level. It's denounced by the Democrats as trickle down, but the country liked it. I mean, he produced great prosperity, and that was one of the greatest eras of African American economic advance. And President Trump, as everybody now knows, made very substantial inroads on the African American vote precisely because of the enterprise zones that Senator Scott, whom you mentioned earlier, had proposed in the Senate and was enacted. So no one should take any voting bloc for granted. And I think the Democrats have taken that block of votes for granted and assumed that they could count on it. If the Republicans play it right, they will not be able to count on it.
I want to give credit to FDR, though. You've written your biography of FDR, and Lyndon Johnson echoed what he learned at FDR's knee when he was a young worker in Congress and then a congressman himself. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as a Democrat, as the governor of New York, understood that segregation was destroying the country, destroying the worthiness of the country, and initiated policies that were the beginning of fair-mindedness in the Great Depression. And it's to credit him today to show that there's no reason to be partisan about this. The presidents who have acted correctly about all men are created equal, all men and women are created equal, have been rewarded, Republican and Democrat, and that could happen again with Senator Scott.
Yeah, well, look, FDR fought. He came in with a collapsed economy. The financial system had collapsed. The stock and commodity exchanges were closed. The banks were closed, and the unemployment rate was 30%. There was no direct relief for them. So he set up all these what would today be called workfare programs, building what would today be called infrastructure, like the Inland Waterway and the Triborough Bridge and so on. And while they were segregated, he gave exactly equal treatment to whites and blacks and everyone else. And that was the first equality that the African Americans had ever had. They were put back to work like everyone else was. And the grants to schools went in prorated equal amounts to them as to whites. So the education level rose. And it was a tremendous step ahead for them. And the next big one was President Truman integrating the armed forces.
Yes.
And then you and I are old enough to remember when President Eisenhower had the 82nd Airborne integrate Central High School in Little Rock in satisfaction of an order by the Supreme Court. So, both presidents of both parties have played a role here, and it would be a mistake for the Democrats to think that they have that vote always sewn up, no matter what they do.
With our final minute, it is a disappointment to me that some politicians are eager to make the question of race equality a partisan issue and blame the other party. It's a disappointment because American history is filled with mistakes, but it has the great success that we've talked about here, and both parties should share it, and many presidents should share that success. We have about 30 seconds. Senator Scott would be a worthy success for the Republican Party. Worthy.
Absolutely, and I'd go one step further. I think it's shameful and disgraceful for anyone who is an American to say America is a racist country. There are racists in every country, but it is not a racist country. It is absolutely an anti-racist country, and no country in the history of the world has done more. It's not perfect, and no one says it's perfect, but has done more to eliminate racism, to bring an oppressed group up to the level of the so-called advantaged groups, and to eliminate racism and disdain it and despise it in its national political culture. No one has done more than the United States has.
Conrad Black, writing at the National Review Online, of Senator Scott of South Carolina. This is CBS Eye on the World. I'm John Batchelor.
Okay, parachutes ready.
Boy, the things I go through to get auto loan rates as low as 1.04% APR for 36 months on new vehicles with PenFed.
You are aware that you don't have to be a military member to save hundreds on your auto loan, aren't you? Anyone can join PenFed.
As someone terrified of heights, I probably should have looked into that.
Probably.
Drop me off at the shore.
PenFed Credit Union. Visit PenFed.org/autos or call 1-800-247-5626. Advertised rates available through the PenFed car buying service. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.